Like Kevin said, this is the Block Cafe. We have a lot of block professionals come and give talks here, so I am honored to be here to giving a presentation to you guys. Kevin himself and Stefan over there are Bitcoin experts. They also know quite a bit about Ethereum. Mark, who is also a Ethereum expert, unfortunately cannot be here today, but we will proceed nonetheless. So we're here to talk about EOS. But before we get started, I just want to get a small survey of the room of what your understanding of blockchain and what you're familiar with the blockchain ecosystem is like. So who here knows about blockchain? Okay, good. Who here has any kind of cryptocurrency? Okay, oh, that's pretty good. Almost same ratio. Okay, good. Now, this one's a little bit more technical. Who here has used a decentralized application before? Okay, a little bit less, but still pretty good. Okay, now, who here has built on top of any kind of blockchain technology before? So I see 1, 2, and 3. So, and maybe 4, 5. Okay, so as you can see, we're still not at the stage where blockchain technology is a very widely accepted and built on technology. It's still a very specialized field, and there are a lot of obstacles for it to becoming a general purpose software platform to be built on for the applications to develop on top of. So here is what EOS aims to solve. EOS is trying to make building on blockchain technologies a little bit easier. So before we even get started, just some disclaimer, I'm not associated with Block.one or any of the companies I'm going to mention. I'm an EOS token holder and work as a blockchain business consultant. The following is not investment advice, and I do not intend to give any investment advice. Okay, so since you guys, guessing, are familiar with blockchain technology and probably to some extent are familiar with EOS, I just want to address some of the issues and concerns right away. So one of the main problems we will have with EOS is the question of decentralization. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are decentralized projects, but what do they mean by that? Decentralized projects, in a sense, means that you have a set of records that are kept in nodes that are just distributed around the world. It's decentralized because no one node makes decisions for the rest of the nodes. Everyone keeps the same record, and this record is the same for every single node that has the record. So this is what they mean by decentralized. And the problem Bitcoin and Ethereum supporters have against EOS is that there is the concept of block producers in EOS. These are the people who are elected to maintain the network. There are 21 validating block producers, but that doesn't mean there's only 21 nodes. There are 121 nodes. The top 21 gets to validate the transactions and send out the produced blocks to the rest of the network. There's 100 backup, and anyone could run an EOS node. So what does that mean? In Bitcoin, if you want to validate a block, you have to have a majority of the hashing power. So that means you have to have it's a probability distribution. If you have 20% of the hashing power, maybe 20% of the time you get to validate a block. In EOS, that's different. You have 21 nodes and they're coordinated so that you know exactly who is validating the block at each moment. So that's a big difference, and that's one of the big problems that, big issues that people talk about when they talk about decentralization. And then legal responsibilities. So in the EOS white paper, they say they're not responsible for the EOS 20 ERC 20 tokens. The tokens mean nothing. They do not do anything. This is to shield them from the legal responsibilities that's associated with a lot of cryptocurrency projects. The security exchange, especially the US security exchange, are looking very tightly into these tokens. If they could be classified as security, they gotta go after the individuals or companies that are doing these projects. So this is kind of their legal cover your ass kind of thing. If everything goes wrong, we're not responsible. It's kind of in the same vein as Linux. So if you have used any kind of Linux projects before for your company or for any kind of infrastructure, the Linux operating system is open source, but if there's any kind of problem, you can't really go and sue the Linux Foundation because they're not responsible. It's said explicitly in the terms and conditions, if you just use the software, you use it as it is, any bugs, any security flaws, you bear the consequences. So it's up to you, the individual who are running these softwares, to make sure that you do your security audits and make sure everything's okay. And another big thing is that they raised $4 billion from the ICO. So $4 billion. I know to those of you who are familiar with the cryptocurrency space, $4 billion might not sound like a lot, but it's a lot. And one of the things that people bring up is that Ethereum only raised $18 million. But you have to kind of have to look at it in context. So when Ethereum raised $18 million, that was to a backdrop of an $11 billion industry. So at that time, back in 2014, the whole ecosystem was only $11 billion. So versus today, versus $354 billion as of today. So just to make some very inaccurate estimations, Ethereum raised about 0.16% of the total market cap back in 2014, whereas EOS raised about 1.6%. So it's about 10 times more. But it's not like orders of magnitude more. It is a big project, but in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, if they could accomplish it, I think it would be worth the cost. And another thing is code security. There's been a lot of talk about how security software is. A lot of rumors about critical flaws in the system. We are actively, the block producer actively looking into these flaws. We have delayed launch of the network because we're still doing security audits. Not every block producer is comfortable with launching the software as it is, so they're still doing security audits as of today. So that's why we are delaying the launch. It was supposed to launch 2 days ago. They had a meeting yesterday at 2 a.m. Lasted for over an hour, and they couldn't come to a definitive decision. So they decided to delay for another 12 hours, to delay for another 24 hours to look deeper into the code. And another thing is, if you've been following very closely, they are printing a little bit more tokens than expected. And this is kind of a silly mistake because unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum, where it's free to create an address, in EOS, you have to pay EOS tokens to create the accounts. So when they migrated the address on Ethereum to EOS, they kind of forgot that. So now the question is, who's going to pay for these for the fee to create these accounts? So the solution going forward now is they're going to print extra tokens to cover the account creation fee, but then they're going to burn any ones afterwards to make it go back to a billion token supply. So I hope I have addressed any of the issues and concerns. If not, I would like to take them now before you bring them up in the middle of the presentation. Yes, Kevin.
I have two.
Yes.
The decentralization aspect, first of all. So it's a problem of terms you use. In Bitcoin, the miners are not validating the blocks. This is a big misconception. The miners are providing work that is hard to replicate, and that is only, the reason for that is only to make very difficult to roll back a block in time, to change the past. But every single full node, so should be everybody, is verifying all the transactions and all the blocks they receive. So everybody is a participant in the consensus, not just the miners. So that was something very different from this. So if a miner, if the miner who is mining the block right now is trying to cheat, his block will not propagate. It doesn't have any power on the network. On EOS, that's different. Just saying.
Okay.
Also, you said $4 billion, you know, it's not crazy. So do you know how much GitHub sold for to Microsoft?
Less than that.
I think it was 7 billion, but not in cash. It was in Microsoft shares.
Yeah.
So it's not liquid as much as cash. And GitHub is a massive,
The actual valuation is under 3 billion.
So yeah, I mean, to me, they're a network that doesn't exist $4 billion, this is a massive red flag. It's the opposite of what you just said, in my opinion. It's not something promising. To me, it's something massive red flag.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
I also have a question regarding the decentralization. I've been following
The shit stories.
I'm following the small movies or presentations in YouTube from the block producers and the EOS Go. I saw a presentation from EOS Canada trying to teach, or it's a teaching movie to other block producers. They want to start being block producers, and he suggested that they would use Google Cloud to as an infrastructure because it was easily scalable and everything. My question is, isn't that against decentralization if everyone goes in line with that advice? It's pro-centralization.
Okay, cool. Let's take one more before I answer the more, please.
It's another concern from me and my team. We were expecting that EOS would launch 1.0 with all the building blocks.
Right.
And we only received the core.
Right.
No EOS storage, no other building blocks around that. We are an app developer, we are also blockchain engineers, and that sounds really weird because when EOS reaches 1.0, it was supposed to be the full product.
Right.
It wasn't supposed to be just the core of it, and now we will have to wait for I don't know how much time to touch the rest of it.
Okay.
I would like to know your opinion and some stuff about it.
Okay. Very good questions. So let's start with the most pressing one, decentralization. That's why I have it number one. Kevin's right that in Bitcoin, every node verifies a transaction, but not every node could include the transactions to be verified. So only the ones that have the most hashing power are likely going to mine the block. So you can kind of think of centralization. Well, you have to think about what the goal of decentralization is, right? Decentralization means it's hard to take down the network. And I don't think it's true that the higher the hash power, the more difficult it is to reverse the network. If the majority of hashing power is concentrated in the hands of a small group of people. So they can always produce a different chain because they still have the hashing power, and that could easily become the longest chain. So this is why this is not the case with Bitcoin because it has very high hashing power with the majority of hashing power being there. But with the smaller proof of work coins, I'm sure you heard about all the 51% attacks. So it was whoever is holding the hashing power that has control over the network. So if the goal of decentralization is to make sure no one controls the network, then the concentration of hashing power is a very big problem for these proof of work hashing algorithms. And for running the nodes on Google Cloud, I do think that's a big problem. One of the reasons why we don't want people running the nodes on AWS or Google Cloud is because these are very big companies. If you're running our nodes on them, it's really hard to say it's decentralized because it's trusting in a centralized authority. So my answer to that is that you as a token holder can vote out block producers that are running nodes on decentralized servers. So it's actually up to us, and I think that's one of the beauties of EOS, where Bitcoin is decentralized kind of just wildly. It's whoever has the hashing power and how the hashing power is distributed. Whereas in EOS, we have, as the users of the network, we have a little bit more control. We can decide how we want to decentralize, which geographical regions we want to operate, et cetera, et cetera. And as for the full product, that's actually a very good point. I think it is a little, maybe it is a little misleading that the delivered product is different from what they said the white paper was going to do. So that's the answer I want to hear from the team as well. So.
And Ethereum has the exact same problem. Ethereum was supposed to be this massively scalable, sharded proof of stake, whatever random word they put in the white paper. And today, what do you have? You just have like a virtual machine on top of a proof of work blockchain.
That's exactly my my worry, you know, because if you promise that you will have the complete set of tools to build applications on it, and then you deliver on the 1.0 just the core of it, when will we have all the blocks, all the building blocks, so that we can play with it at least, or build applications on top of it? I have several projects of my own, and this project is a big one. It's Emanate. It's a blockchain for the music industry. The growing of D-Sound, which is my last project, over Steam. And I want to build that. I have my own compromises. I have my own project deadlines and so on. And I was counting that the 1st of June to have something to play with. Could be not the final product, but at least the building blocks. The EOS storage is one of those. I definitely need storage on my project, and all the other blocks. And I don't have anything. I just have the core and nothing more. I am really pro EOS, really. Okay. But I was a little bit disappointed with that.
I think
the thing.
I think
Not
that's
disappointed, concerned.
concerned and disappointed.
A mix of the two.
Yeah. I mean, I was a little disappointed that we didn't. I was hoping that the mainnet will launch by the time we give this presentation. But
nobody took my bet, by the way.
Kevin made a bet about whether or not we have the mainnet by today, and if anyone would have took the bet, he would have won. Yes.
Do you know if we have these building blocks on testnet?
Sorry?
Do you know if we have these building blocks on testnet?
No, the software does not supporting the EOS storage or the parallel execution of chains, unless yeah. So a lot of the components are not there yet. So right now it's just a single blockchain.
So to summarize,
Yes.
it's happening the same thing that has happened to almost every project in the space. They hype too much, they deliver too low. They under-deliver all the time. So it shouldn't be news to anybody.
But I don't think we'll know that before the mainnet launch.
Well,
So that's the thing, because they've been, like the block producers, they've been meeting every, I don't know, some hours, and there's something that we don't know yet, so we cannot judge.
The code is not there.
But the code is somewhere, because for them to launch it,
the code of the chain is out there, but not the code of the tools, and that's the problem. So they will not release like.
Yeah, what I don't understand, because we had this medium from them about the 3.0, right, with many points that evolved from the core 1.0, and that they were supposed to be launched. So for what I understand, I've been following, I think, most of the block producers. It's all about security at this stage. So it's all about security. It's guaranteeing that something that will come out will not have bugs or breaches or anything that will harm the network, the infrastructure.
I'm completely.
But I'm also very agnostic, and for me it was always not frustrating but concerning that with this fundraise they could not put together something that would launch quickly. And but I also understand that there was no consensus. The block producers they jumped out in a very late stage. And right now they're able to participate because I not even had the idea that everyone would participate before the voting. And right now everyone's taking part. They have conference calls with 100 people. So everyone is taking part of trying to figure out what's going on with the testnet.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I that it's something this big is happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
that's really,
but that's concerning. It's concerning to me as a supporter, as someone that's following EOS almost from the beginning, that they get to this stage with this fundraise and they're not able to be quick enough to deliver.
Money doesn't buy time.
Okay, this is a very
It's not about money,
interesting
it's
conversation.
about the organization.
But I think
we'll
we
come
could
back
carry on this after the
Yeah.
presentation. So here are just some of the issues. Maybe you want to keep them in mind as I'm doing the presentation. If you have any good question, we have a small break halfway between the presentation. I don't want to keep everyone sitting too long. So there we go. So before we even understand what EOS is, we kind of have to understand the two projects that really influence what EOS wanted to do. So one of them is Bitcoin. And I want to just go a little bit into what Bitcoin aims to do. So Bitcoin was a vision as a way to disrupt banking by creating a ledger that's distributed and throughout a ledger that is kept by anyone that has a Bitcoin node, and is secured by its integrity secure by having this record distributed to everyone. So anyone who wishes to can run their own Bitcoin node, and if you run your own Bitcoin node, you can have full certainty that your Bitcoin is going to be there. It's not like when you deposit money into a bank, you don't know what the bank is doing your money. They might say they are doing, they're holding your money in a safe, but you can never trust it. But Bitcoin's a little bit different. If you have a private key, no one can move your funds away from you. So that's what Bitcoin aims to do. So the second big inspiration for EOS was Ethereum. So Ethereum saw this Bitcoin ledger that's distributed around the world, and it saw it as a simple computation system. So you have the initial state. Let's say I have 1 Bitcoin, Kevin has 2 Bitcoin, and I send a transaction of 1 Bitcoin to Kevin. Now I have 0, and now Kevin has 3. So that simple subtracting and adding is a simple computation. So the initial state was Jack 1, Kevin 2. And then after transaction is Jack 0, Kevin 3. So the Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum, saw this as what he called a state machine. But instead of just using it for keeping records who owns what, he wanted to generalize this concept and build a full-on computer on top of it. So he wanted to create a system where you have your initial state and you have some sort of computation that's run on all of these different nodes, and you arrive at this output that can be verified by every single node who received those instructions. So that was the big thing behind Ethereum, and that's just what I said. So the result of the computation can be verified by anyone who is running an Ethereum node. So these are the two big inspirations for EOS. So I want to talk a little bit about business. So there's been a lot of interest in business developers who want to put their applications or want to create some kind of structure on top of the Bitcoin Ethereum blockchain. But there has been a lot of issues and hurdles they must overcome. So a business has certain risks they must deal with. And these are the 3 biggest ones when it comes to blockchain. So user errors. So if a user mistypes something or sends the funds to someone, types of address and sends the funds to the wrong person. Hacks. If the hacker exploits the software, they lose millions of dollars of funds. And forks. So what happens when a chain splits? Which one becomes legitimate? How do you determine which chain becomes legitimate? You can't just apply simple proof of work algorithm, because the very definition of 51% attack is someone who has more than 51% of the hashing network attacking the system. So the attack chain, the result of that attack cannot be the legitimate chain. So here's a brief history of these errors that happen in the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchain, and why is it putting off business developers from building on these blockchains. So here are some notable errors in the Bitcoin blockchain, user errors. So on August 28, 2013, a user sent 200 Bitcoin in feeds, not the transaction, but the feed itself, and it was processed by a miner. On April 25th, 2015, and someone else accidentally, due to software glitch, someone sent 85 Bitcoins as feeds again. And in 2015, someone else sent 4.6 Bitcoins, now worth about $1,000. And in 2016, someone sent 291 Bitcoins, worth about $137,000. And it was processed as transaction fees. So what happened in all these cases was that through social media, these users they publicized their mistake. And what happened was these responsible parties that processed the transaction actually funded the fees back to the users. But this is not a system that was governing system built on top of the blockchain. This was just reaching out individual miners to correct these mistakes. So you can imagine a bank, when a bank user missends something, you can't be sure that the miners will take action to refund the process. These miners are just doing it out of their own goodwill. There's nothing in the protocol that says, hey, this user did mistakenly said something, please reverse the transaction. There's nothing like that in Bitcoin. Bitcoin transactions by design are designed to be irreversible, so when you send a transaction to someone, you cannot take it back. And then there's hacks and forks. So the biggest hack probably was a value overflow incident that happened in 2010 when someone exploited a bug in software to send himself $184 billion Bitcoins. And on March 23rd, something happened here. They exploited another bug where 600 Bitcoins were mined, but those blocks were eventually orphaned. The community came together and decided those were not legitimate blocks. This was, again, not in the Bitcoin protocol. This is just people, the community, the Bitcoin community, who running these nodes decided that this block was not legitimate due to a software error. And then there's hacks. So Bitfinex got hacked in 2016 and lost 119,000 Bitcoins, approximately 66 million US dollars. And the result of that was law enforcement had to get involved. And they brought Bitfinex to court, and Bitfinex had to refund the user a portion of the fees. But all these incidents, user errors and forks, the resolution happened outside of the blockchain. And yes?
So the refund with the token?
Yeah.
Created the token for that?
Yeah, so it's just a way for them to refund the fees for Bitfinex. So all these incidents happen on the blockchain, but how they resolve these issues were outside the blockchain. So if you're doing business, you cannot always expect these things to be solved on the network. You just kind of have to hope that maybe it will make enough controversy, get enough bad press that the people will make good on it. So that's in Bitcoin. And in Ethereum, Parity Wallet, Parity, the company that designs wallets and Ethereum nodes, have a very bad track record in the software. And a vulnerability was found on the multi-sig wallet where an attacker was able to steal 150,000 ethers, approximately $30 million US dollars from their wallet software. And then there's the most famous one, the DAO attack, when someone hacked a smart contract on the DAO and it forced the Ethereum network to split. And then just today or yesterday, they discovered a critical bug in the Ethereum software that could affect every single node that runs a Parity Ethereum node and force them to accept invalid transactions. All these were solved outside of the blockchain. So you don't have a mechanism on the blockchain to resolve problems that occur on the blockchain. What this means is that you do not have an enclosed ecosystem. Instead, you rely on outside actions, either do social pressure, bad press, or even do legal enforcements to come and correct these problems. So, actually, just go back on that point. What does this mean for a business? So, if you're a business using some kind of software, or you're a user using a business software developed on the blockchain, you're at risk of committing these errors. It might not be $100 million, it might just be $1,000, it might just be $10,000. And you don't know for sure that your mistake will be corrected by the software company. The software company makes no promises to its users about your transactions. So we need some kind of system that addresses these needs. We need some kind of rules to make sure that in case of these hacks happen, we have some kind of procedure to resolve these problems. Now I want to talk about what business needs. If you want to build on blockchain, what kind of things do you need a blockchain to have in order to make your business viable? First, you need to be able to scale. In Bitcoin, you do only process about 7 transactions per second. In Ethereum, you could process only about 15 per second. And that's only just moving the transactions to the blockchain. Getting it verified is not a problem. In Bitcoin, it's 10 minutes per block in Bitcoin. That means even though you send a transaction, you still have to wait 10 minutes to get one confirmation. And unless for security purposes, you probably want to wait for 6 confirmations, which should take up to an hour. So it's not very fast. In Ethereum, this is 10 to 20 seconds per block. It's a little bit faster. And stability. You need some kind of rules governing the direction of the blockchain. In Bitcoin and Ethereum, this is very much a ad hoc kind of thing. In Bitcoin, it's the miners who has the most hashing power. They kind of dictate whether or not they want to update the software, which decisions they like. There's always a fight between the developers and the miners, and it's not a very pleasant process, to put it at least. And in Ethereum, it's mostly dependent on Vitalik Buterin, who is the creator of the Ethereum software. And so he, as the creator, has a huge sway over the direction of the blockchain software. But all these are very inconsistent decisions. When do you decide to fork? When do you decide to upgrade? Under what circumstances should you upgrade? It's kind of like the Ethereum DAO, right? So in the Ethereum DAO forced Ethereum to fork, but the last hack of the DAO contained 16% of the Ethereum. And because Ethereum wants to transition to proof of stake system, they really didn't want a hacker, a bad actor, to have 16% of the funds of the network to have a huge influence over the network. But in the recent hack of the parity wallets, over something like, I think 200,000 Ethereum was frozen, but they decided not to hack. They decided not to fork. So there's no criteria for deciding whether or not we should fork. There's no clear guideline. There's no clear decision-making process. So that creates unpredictability. So we need some kind of rules to determine, here, if this problem happens, here's what we're gonna do. Inside the blockchain, not outside, not relying on people, actors outside the blockchain, but relying on the very rules that govern the blockchain itself. So we gotta take a little break now. I might answer a few questions, and then I might allow everyone to do a little bit of stretching, and we come back here in 10 minutes. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Yeah, questions before we go? No? Okay, all right. So let's take a 10-minute break, and then, yeah, it's like, the whole point of EOS is how do we make building businesses on top of the blockchain a little bit easier, because right now, there's a lot of business interest. Banks are interested, a lot of companies are interested, a lot of insurance companies are interested, but they just can't really get the handle on it, because you have kind of like this Wild West. If anything goes, if hacker steals funds, like that's hackers, like they keep it, unless the community decides to fork the blockchain, and you don't really have a criteria, like what's the amount? Like, is it like 10% of the network we fork the chain? Is it like what if I only lost 9.9%? Like, do I just kind of lose my money? Like, there's all these uncertainties kind of stopping business from jumping into the blockchain space. And what's happening now is that businesses are taking blockchain technology and they're kind of privatizing it. They're making it permission blockchains, where it's not just anyone could go in and open like an address and start using their blockchain. You have to sign up through the banks or through the insurance company in order to use the blockchain technology. So we want to, with EOS, not we, because I'm not involved in the technical sense, but with EOS, what they want to do is create a structure where business could operate comfortably and individual could interact with the blockchain comfortably. So you don't only have individuals and you don't only have corporations and business. There's this golden medium space where we could coexist. So again, For business developers, software developers, that first half was kind of beware if you're interested in a project. Here are all the issues you should think about before you step into the arena. So in the second half, we're going to talk about the potentials. So after hearing all the terrible things about EOS, what does EOS promise to bring us? Like, why should we still be interested in a project about these issues? So let's hear about the potentials you bring. So these slides are from the CTO of Block.one and one of the leading partners, Ian Gregg, who is an individual I respect a lot because his thinking process. And I modify some of the slides to update and also add in my own details to address some of the issues. So here's the team. You have Ian Gregg, which is the slide who I made use of. And you have the CTO, which is Dan Lam right here. And you have Brennan Berner, who is the CEO. And you have this guy, who is the leader of Feng Shui Bao. And we'll get into that in just the next slide. So here is their total team. Here's everyone. So EOS has a big industry support behind them. They're not a new startup. They're working with people who's been in the cryptocurrency space for a very long time. So right here you have Blockchain Capital. They're one of the first venture capital funds created. They have invested in a lot of early cryptocurrency projects, and their lead director is this guy, Black Pierce. You might have heard about him from his controversial background from John Oliver, the comedian. He's no longer part of the Block.one team, but his venture capital fund is still cooperating with Block.one to fund startup projects in the ecospace. And you also have Galaxy Capital, which is a big merchant bank capital fund. They are doing payment systems and they're collaborating with EOS also. And you have Feng Boucher, which again is with this guy. And the interesting about Feng Boucher is that on the board sits the founder of Ethereum. So Vitalik Buterin is actually on the board of Feng Boucher Capital, and they're investing in one of their competitors. So that's just an interesting point to note. I think if you're doing business, maybe it's not so bad to set aside differences and make a little bit of profit on top of that. And you have Bitfinex, one of the top exchanges in the cryptocurrency space. They're actually building a version of Exchange, a decentralized exchange on top of the EOS operating system. And you have Banker, a very prominent project on the Ethereum network. They're also a decentralized exchange, plus some extra algorithmic with that. It's a little bit complicated, so we skip that for today. And we have this, which is what I found out is a very prominent Korean venture capital. So you can tell that they're approaching the space from a very different perspective. Whereas in Bitcoin, it's kind of just private companies hiring core developers to develop different applications. In Ethereum, it's the Ethereum Foundation that are funding all these efforts. In EOS, Block.one, the company behind the software, is actually partnering with a lot of venture capitalists to fund and filter out projects. So if you have interacted with Ethereum ecosystem at all, you know that there's a lot of bad projects. There's a lot of gambling and pyramid schemes. So by partnering with venture capitalists, they want to filter out some of these projects and focus on some of the projects that are more valuable to the general public. So here are just a few of the projects that are being worked on right now. One of the more prominent ones is Wikipedia, which is headed by the co-founder of Wikipedia. So what they're trying to do is create a decentralized version of Wikipedia where they don't have to beg for funds every year. They hope to be a self-sustaining organization, do decentralizing. Another one is Ono, a very prominent social network that's been advertised.
Everdex is there.
And then we have M&A.
That was my concern, because I think every PDA is not one of the most important. I think M&A is.
It's on top.
It's on top.
Yeah, that's why it's on top. That's what's hiding one here.
You were saving it for last.
Yes. So there's a lot of interesting projects already prototyping, developing on top of the ecosystem, even though the mainnet hasn't launched. And the interesting thing is that EOS aims to allow all these applications to be able to interact with each other. So maybe Ono interacts with M&A in somehow, and maybe Wikipedia have the artist page of M&A, and that would lead some kind of collaboration. With EDM projects, that's a little bit more difficult, and there's a lot of friction because every time these applications want to communicate, you have to send the transaction, and these transactions have transaction fees, so that limits how much they can communicate with each other. So don't think of these projects as individual projects. Think of it as a component on the ecosystem. Again, if EOS is an operating system, all these are applications that could talk to each other on the application. So that creates kind of synergy that would be very interesting. So, why EOS? So, the point of EOS is to enable people to build business on top of it. So, what is a business? So, we could take a business like iTunes, right? It's a business, you charge fee, you pay for songs, you get your songs on the iTunes application. And it's built on top of operating system. That would be a Mac OS. And this Mac OS runs on a computer, which is the Apple computer. If you have a Mac or anything, you run Mac, and you have an application called iTunes that you can purchase songs from. So right now we're very good at this point with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum a little bit more because it aims to be a computer, but it's still very difficult. Ethereum doesn't provide a kind of structure that allows you to build applications very easily. So what do you need to be able to build an application, easily build application? Well, your application, one, needs to be interactable on the web. A lot of us are using Facebook, or maybe using WeChat connected to our phone on the web. A lot of applications we use today are web applications. With the exception of like Adobe or whatever, these very heavy computational applications, most of the time we interact with applications are web applications. It's got to be able to handle millions of users. So if you want your business to succeed, you want more customers, right? You want to be able to handle millions of customers per day. With that, that's just not possible. With Ethereum, the most popular application by far was CryptoKitties, and its height is only going to handle 16,000 users before the network came to a screeching halt, where nothing else on the network could be done. It's got to be free to use. Who here has used any kind of Ethereum decentralized applications before? 1, 2, 3. So 4. So if you use Ethereum decentralized applications, you know that every time you want to interact with the application, you have to send a transaction, and every transaction you send has an associated fee.
Yeah.
So that just makes people have to calculate. It's like, do I really want to purchase a song for $1 when I have to pay a $2 transaction fee on top of it? It's kind of no-brainer. Like, why would I want to do that? I want to be able to purchase a song. I'm already spending $1. Why am I paying $2 for a transaction? It just makes no sense. So it's got to be responsive. It's got to be fast. Like I said before, Bitcoin takes 10 minutes for a confirmation. So if you click on a chat application built on top of Bitcoin, for example, you have to wait 10 minutes before your message is sent. And Ethereum is a little bit better. It's 10, 15 seconds, but still it's a long time. On EOS, they aim to achieve 0.5 seconds. That's still not as fast as the applications we use today, but it's close enough that the difference would be hardly noticeable. Yes?
You have to mention Lightning Network.
Lightning Network. Yes, Lightning Network is built on top of Bitcoin, but that brings it with its own kind of problem with decentralization, and you don't know which Lightning Network hub you have to use. So that's another large topic, and we will cover it once it's fully operational. It's got to be upgradable. If you do a smart contract business on top of Ethereum, like the Parity wallets, once you deploy the code, it's there and you cannot upgrade it. So what happens when there's a bug and exploit in your software? Well, it's kind of like what happened in the DAO. When the DAO bug was discovered and funds were being drained from the DAO, all the people could do was sit there and watch as the funds slowly drain. They cannot upgrade the software, they cannot freeze the account, they just have to watch as the money flow into the hacker's wallet. So we gotta have some way to, if something goes wrong, freeze the code, upgrade it, and make it right. Account names, we all handle Bitcoin address, Ethereum address before. I don't remember mine. I'm doubtful if anyone here in the room said they remember theirs. So having a username system is much more easy to interact with. And you shouldn't have to be able to buy. This is kind of same of having to pay for your user's application. And you have to get back your account. So let's say you have a social network on top of Ethereum, right? If you lose your private key, that hacker has forever access to your account. You cannot change the password. Now you kind of have to just share your account with the hacker. You probably don't want to, so you just have to create a new account. But you lost all the information that's associated with that account. With EOS, there is a way for you to update your password and recover your account so you're not losing everything. And another powerful aspect is that in EOS, there's time lock transactions where, let's say you have a huge amount of funds, you lock them in a time lock transaction. If someone wants to transfer them out, they have to wait, let's say, 3 days or 7 days, so that even if the hacker compromises your password, if he starts the transaction, he has to wait 3 to 7 days. And within those 3 to 7 days, you get back your account, cancel the transaction, and you recover your fund. Whereas in Bitcoin and Ethereum, if someone gets hold of your private key, your fund is gone, and it's gone after 10 minutes, 15 seconds, and you cannot take it back. So if we want our grandmas and moms to start using blockchain to store their funds, that's something we need. It's got to be handled with 1,000 transactions. Again, if you're doing message application, Telegram sends about 1 billion messages per day. Bitcoin can't handle that. Ethereum can't handle that. EOS is most likely the platform that's able to handle that kind of transaction. And again, this is kind of goes with upgradable but recovery. If something goes wrong with your program, you're going to freeze it, you're going to upgrade the code and make sure your user could use it after you have upgraded it normally. So, just for fun, here's a chart of all the most popular cryptocurrency projects, and here's how much transaction they process per day. So, at the top is actually Steam. It's one of the projects by the CEO of EOS before. It's processing about 1 million transactions per day. It's averaging about 1.6 million transactions, etc., etc. And here you can see how much of the capacity the network is using. So it's actually using just, you can't see here, but it's about 0.14% of the network. So we're doing about 1.7 million transactions seconds a day, and we're only using a fraction of a percentage of our network. Compare that with Ethereum, it's handling about 500,000 transactions, and it's really halfway full. So 1 million transactions per day at maximum capacity. Bitcoin is about 179,000 transactions, and that's about a third full. So multiplied by, let's say, 600,000 transactions. So its magnitude is greater, right? This is a project, again, by Dan Lerman before. This has not had the feature that Dan Lerman said EOS will have. Assuming it does deliver on their promises, you're able to do millions, if not billions, transactions per day. So imagine something like Facebook, right? Every time you put a like, every time you post a comment, that's a transaction on the blockchain. And Facebook probably handles about, Facebook has about 3 billion users. If everyone just does a like per day, that'd be 3 billion transactions seconds per day. You can't build on top of Bitcoin, you can't build on top of Ethereum. The only thing you can build on top of is EOS. So EOS does this by enabling parallel processing of smart contracts. How this is done is a little bit technical, but basically they break down different transaction types, and they break down between the signature verification, which is the computational heavy part, with the action itself. If the signature, so in Bitcoin right now, you verify the signature, and you verify the transaction, and the transaction goes through. In EOS, the signature verification is one process, and verifying transactions is another process. both run in parallel, and at the end, if the signature is valid and the action is valid, they go through. And this applies to you not just doing one action, right? A like is different than doing a post. By having multiple chains, you could do all these things in parallel, and you enable things happen a higher throughput. Horizontal scalability, what this just means bigger blocks, faster block times. Asynchronous communication. So it just means that if I send you a message, you do not have to be online on the other end to be able to receive the message. Once you come online, you better get that message. Interoperability, that just means chains that are doing parallel could communicate with each other within the cycle. And EOS provides a framework to building applications. So it has a database, not yet released. It has account permissions, that's already done. Scheduling is done by the block producers. Authentication, inter-app communication. That goes again to all the applications be able to communicate with each other on the same blockchain. And at the bottom of it is the EOS computer, which is the actual physical hardware that are running all these computations and verifying the transactions. So again, here are some of the features. It's scalable, it's flexible, you can fix your applications. It has governance, it has rules determining what behaviors are expected and what behavior are punishable on the blockchain. And it's usable, whatever that means, it just means user-friendly. So, one of the most distinguishing features between EOS and Bitcoin and Ethereum is its governing structure. Why do we need governance? Governance by constitution is the big idea enabled by EOS. What this does is enforce laws where code cannot do community. So in Ethereum, there's this ethos of code is law. Whatever the program is written to do, if it executes a program thoroughly, that is the law. We do not change it. We do not. That's how the system operates. But they violated their ethos very early with the DAO hack. The DAO hack was the exploit of the software. The software run perfectly as intended. That's what the code allowed. But that was not the intention of the code. The code never, the programmers of the DAO never intended for people to go hack the DAO and drain the funds. So that was not written into the code. That wasn't the intention of the developers. And to keep in mind that software development is very difficult for those of you who are developed software before. It's very difficult to write perfect code unless you're writing some small lines of, like a tic-tac-toe game, and even that might have its vulnerabilities. So having a system where the human intention of the code can be enforced by the people who are operating the network and by shareholders, token holders, is something we want. So what do I mean when I say enforcing laws where code cannot? So one example is drawn from the Constitution is Article 3, rights, and I'll just read this quickly. Members grant the right of contract and acquire property to each other, therefore no property shall change hands except with the consent of the owner by a valid arbitrator's order or community referendum. This Constitution creates no positive right for or between any members. So this is a very long way of saying your private property rights are protected. If someone goes and hacks or steals your private key, we will make you right. Your wallet that you place on the table is still your wallet. Just because I could go up to it and steal it, it does not make it my wallet. Your property right is protected. If your account gets compromised, if a software bug, software bug gets exploited and you lose all your funds, we make it right. We have a system where we could make these changes to the protocol to give you your funds back. Or some other rates. So open source, anything you put on the blockchain is public. Any code you write, any smart contract code you put on the blockchain is public. Anyone can copy it. So you can't make claims to copyrights. Intellectual properties are frowned upon, to say the least. There's still a way to get around it, but this is kind of just like, and the corollary to that is publishing. This is just property rights, intellectual property rights applied to entertainment or any kind of creative intellectual property. So this is, I wouldn't say this is a good or bad thing. I think this is just kind of a change. And this is kind of like going back to the early days of the internet, right? So for those of you who are old enough to remember the early days of the internet, and I think most of you are, since you guys seem like you're a little bit older than I am. So you remember that in the early days of the internet, there were a lot of, one of my favorite things on the internet was remixes. You know, people take others' creative content and they make their own content. It was great. Like, it was like this great explosion of creativity, right? But nowadays, that's not possible. Nowadays, if you put up a YouTube video that uses certain music, you're likely to get a copyright strike, or you know, modify some meme to put on the internet. Maybe the meme's creator will sue you for some kind of lawsuit, and it just creates a culture where people are very afraid to put out their creation for public view. So this is kind of reinforcing what was happening in the early days of the internet, where if you publish something on the internet, you're kind of by, even though you're not saying it, you're giving permission for other people to make use of it. Again, you could get around it by having, you know, instead of publishing, let's say, a novel on the internet, you publish a link of the novel on the blockchain. That way, you know, it's not on the blockchain. You can still claim copyright to it, but just keep in mind anything you publish on the EOS blockchain is considered fair game. Okay. So again, why business want to build on EOS? It can scale, and EOS and any other cryptocurrencies by nature is international, and things change. You reach out to the internet audience. You could create business that have a workforce that comes and goes. You don't have to contract someone for an extended period of time. You just put out a task that someone could take up, and once they're done, they can leave. So you can have any kind of business structure that rely on people like contributing once, twice, and then someone else takes up the job. That's a great structure for you to take advantage of. It has to be transparent. Again, if you write your business logic on the blockchain, everyone can see exactly what's going on. It's kind of you going public day one. You're becoming a public company day one. You do not have trade secrets because everything is transparent. And if your service requires recurring small payments, so microtransactions are free. Any kind of payment are free on the network. So let's say you want to create a social media network that pays everyone a little bit for running a comment, or maybe you want to create a decentralized Twitter that pays people per tweet. You could do that. Right now, you can't do that on like Visa or PayPal. The cost of sending a transaction is much higher than the fee you want to pay the person. So that just enables a lot of business models that requires a lot of small microtransactions to be made. And why do users want to use a blockchain application? I think one of the things that blockchain enables is ownership. It revolutionizes ownership. Right now, if you're using Facebook, if you're using Instagram, if you're using GitHub, whatever it is, you do not have control of the service. If the company owners decide to change the rule the next day, you do not have a say. You cannot vote, you cannot call the CEO, you do not have any control over it. With these tokenized platforms, you essentially become a small part owner of these companies. And with enough people, you could sway the direction of the company. You could replace this executive, or whatever it is, provided they have the structure. Yeah, this is why I think a lot of ERC20 tokens are maybe not the best projects to invest in, because you're still relying on the co-creators to manage these tokens. And these tokens do not influence application in any way other than enable us to use them. So they're not any different from traditional application. If you have a CryptoKitty, you're still relying on the CryptoKitty people to say they're not going to make more CryptoKitties, right? You cannot vote out the guy who's making CryptoKitties if he say, I'm just going to make 100,000 extra CryptoKitties tomorrow, right? You do not have that kind of control. Some of the examples like, Bitmain is doing an IPO, and I think this is a huge problem, maybe not now, but probably for the blockchain, for Bitcoin specifically. Bitmain, if you don't know, is one of the main provider of the mining softwares in the Bitcoin ecosystem. When they do an IPO, what does that mean? It means that they have to follow government regulations, but it also means they're now open to private investors. If you're a private investor invested in a Bitmain company, and the Chinese government say, hey, we don't like this, what you're doing with your miners, with your mining equipment, we want you to change direction. That's a huge, like as a private investor, like, okay, yeah, sure, the government, I don't want to lose my money, do whatever the government says. So they're opening up themselves up to external influences. So, and they're one of the biggest players in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So you open up private investor interests to a blockchain that might not fit, that might not have the same interests as you do. This could change, I don't know. Another example is GitHub. GitHub, I'm sure a lot of software developers use GitHub. They've been recently purchased by Microsoft. And even though Microsoft has changed its culture lately, they're embracing open source software a lot more. You never know what happened, right? Now a lot of projects are migrating from GitHub, but wouldn't it be better if GitHub did like an ICO and allows like, hey, you know, you the users, we want to sell, like we're not operating profit, but if you want to keep our service independent, here's how you can support us. You could become part owner of our service. Then you don't have to like, you know, move your projects or migrate somewhere else. I think that's the real power of blockchain. Blockchain is about like enabling small ownership and services that you got fine control. If a social media company like Facebook has a token and you don't like what they're doing monetizing your data, you have a say. Right now you're just kind of like using maybe a slightly outdated metaphor. You're kind of like peasants working at their farm, at the feudal lord's estates, right? They provide you with services like food and clothing, they give you a place to stay. But at the end of the day, your labor, which is your information that you put on the network, belongs to them. At any time, they can sell the land and they can kick you out. And that's that. With blockchain, you could become a part owner and you have some more say about these services and the direction they take. So that's my presentation for EOS and my case for why you should build on top of EOS. I am very excited to hear all your questions, and I have future meetups here. This is the link to our meetup group. Twitter as Jacques Wells, and here's my email.
You should make a Telegram group with the people that are taking part.
And I do have a Telegram group.
So I need to share that with us.
I'll share everything on the meetup page. So that's all. Thank you very much. And now I'm all yours for questioning.
Okay, first one.
Yes.
3 or 4 slides back, you
Yes.
kind of make it look, no, it's after that one. You kind of make it, yeah, that. You kind of make it look like using EOS as network is feeless, so you pay no fee for the transaction.
Right.
Is that absolutely correct?
Okay, so I think you know the answer. You just want to make it public. So how it works on EOS is that there's inflation, and there's a concept that Dan Lerner's theory very like is taxation through inflation, and that's my quote. So don't steal that. So what happens is that as a user, you have EOS tokens and you stake them. Usually you just do this by paying the account creation fee. That's your staking fee. You're given some percentage of the network. Let's say the network's doing 100,000 transactions per day. Sorry. And you have staked 1% of the network, so you're allowed to make 1,000 transactions per day. In the Bitcoin Ethereum model, is whoever pays the most fee gets most likely get the transaction process. In Ethereum, once you pay upfront, you guarantee at least some level of service. So one of my favorite examples is that when CryptoKitty was very popular, the taking over the network, things like decentralized exchanges built on Ethereum could not work just at all because it's so expensive to push through a transaction. Sorry?
It was a member Ether Delta.
And yeah, exactly. So that kind of creates a situation where the success of one application or network damages your business. Like if CryptoKitty is doing well, fine, like great. But I want to still be able to let my users use my application, right? So what this system does is guarantee some baseline performance. You know ahead of time if let's say your application is doing 10,000 transactions per second per day, you stake whatever tokens that's necessary to get that requirement, and you will always have that bandwidth allowed to you. And in the case of when the network's not popular, you can actually exceed that. Just like, so even though you stake only for 10,000 transactions per day, if the network's operating at the low capacity, you go to 20,000, 30,000. Again, you can exceed your limit, but you would never go below it.
So you have to have tokens to keep them staking.
Yes, you have to have
Service.
tokens.
It's not really feelers. You do have a fee because you have to keep staking.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tokens.
but you can take that stake back anytime you sell it. So
If you don't stake, your code is removed from the blockchain.
no, it's kind of like Ethereum where how when you deploy code, you kind of have to like pay the fee. It's the same thing. And if you decide to unstake it, then your code
Freezes?
freezes.
No longer runs?
It won't be. You won't be able to make
It's
transactions.
At least you have tokens in your wallet. You can use that percentage of operations, right?
Sorry?
But when you say fee, it isn't only for RAM, or it's also for bandwidth and CPU.
It's also so the RAM thing is another complicated thing that I brought up. It used to be just one thing, and you get your RAM and your bandwidth. So now it's two things. You actually have to stake for RAM, and you have to you have to stake for bandwidth, and you have to buy RAM. So that's a little bit different now.
And with 1% fee in the RAM.
If you trade it, if you decide to buy and sell it. Yeah.
Sell and
You have to buy.
Yeah.
and sell. So to locate more RAM, you need to pay a fee.
Sorry?
To locate more RAM, for example, to create a new account, if you are only interested in changing balances,
No, you don't have to.
you don't have to pay for the fee, right? You would just stake.
I'm sorry. Wait. So you're talking about bandwidth or RAM right now?
For example,
Right.
I'm saying two examples. One that I think you have to pay for RAM, other that you don't. You just take your tokens for bandwidth and CPU to be processed. For a transaction.
So if you already have an account, and usually that's what the RAM is for, just to register accounts, then no, you don't have to.
Then yes, if you already have an account,
Yeah.
just transferring some POS for you.
Right.
I don't have to pay a fee for RAM.
Oh, sorry. And
Yeah,
It's not just for the accounts, it's for the space. If you need space in the RAM, you have to have RAM in your account to be able to use that space. That applies to new accounts. Space for them. So you have to buy RAM.
okay.
For example, as well,
Right. To be perfectly honest, I'm not too sure what to do with the RAM. I think they're still kind of figuring it out. No, they figured it out.
It's in the native concept.
It's okay.
It is.
Okay. So but this is a recent change, so I have to update on that. And another thing, if you, like I said, there's a cost of opening an account, but once you open an account with one service, your account is available to all the applications. So if you are a developer, and if you have a user who already have an account, let's say at Horse Pay, then that user, you don't have to make him pay for an account, or you don't have to pay for his account. So yeah, I think these starting companies are taking some cost for later developments, because they're already registering users, and users can use applications, use accounts across applications. Yes.
And I have two questions. One, the fact that you just have one account, can the application knows what other service are you using? So
Yes.
it's a completely transparent.
It's completely transparent.
Wow.
Yes.
That's kind of in terms of privacy.
Yeah. So what you could do is just open multiple accounts if you want to. Let's say there's a dating service on EOS, then it's kind of like, you know, Facebook allows you to log in with use a Facebook account along with different services. If you don't want Facebook to have that information, then you probably want to open an account with your Gmail or whatever, the separate account unrelated to all the Facebook stuff.
But so you can have separated accounts. You are not.
Yeah, of course. You can just open as many accounts as you want.
And another thing related to the microtransactions, do you have a global blockchain ledger that will record every single microtransaction that is done?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Do you have an idea of how quickly that will become like a massive thing that is?
Yeah, so they're talking about, so there's two things that they do with that. Is one, they're not keeping the state in memory, which is what Ethereum does. So all they do is keeping record of the different things you're doing. So that kind of lowers the amount of thing you have to store. So what Ethereum now is like, you know, you have the transactions, but also the complete state of the blockchain is kept in memory also. So now we're just keeping track of different things that happen and when they happen. So when they replay, you achieve the same result, or it's deterministic. And they gotta prune off a certain amount of old data after certain time periods. So some of the old stuff will not be kept. So if you're running an application, you probably want to run a node and keep the data as relevant to the application on the node.
Is there a time defined for like time slots for the pruning?
I don't know if they actually.
So self-corrupting beginning of chain.
Sorry?
The chain will become corrupted in a way. You lose information from the beginning, from the oldest transaction.
Well, it doesn't have to.
Not the chain, what's kept in memory. And that's natural. Yeah.
You just
Because the chain
Just the
is one
status
thing.
at that time.
The state is kept in memory, but it's not all the state. It's just the fraction, the more usable,
Okay.
the recent information.
So
From what I understood, it's a snapshot and the transactions after that snapshot.
No, not transactions. State is different.
One
For
thing is
example,
the blockchain with the log of
No,
transactions.
the
Other
snapshot
is
is a state. Your balance, let's say.
yeah,
And
it's
if you want to keep the record, you have the.
no, the transactions is the log of the changing of the state. So the log is kept, but the state is the most recent change of that information. Okay, for example, a balance. If you do 3 transactions to add 1 EOS, in the end you have a state with just the 3 balance and not the history.
yeah, so it is right. It's periodic snapshots.
Maybe I'm doing
It's periodic snapshots. You just keep
but
keep the records of those that have
But the
balance.
difference
All
of
the
the
rest
state
is
is in
stripped
the
out.
RAM.
It doesn't matter.
the log.
You can erase all the state and rebuild it with the log of the
Yeah.
chain. You know?
Yeah, you can erase the state, but the blockchain has all the transactions.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can rebuild the state at any moment with the transactions in the chain.
Yeah. What happens to the old transaction? You have to keep a log of everything. You have to keep the ledger.
The blockchain is one thing. So there's all the blocks there since the Genesis block, and with all the transactions in between until now. That's the blockchain. The state of the blockchain is kind of a database that is kept in memory. And that database, well, for instance, when you start a node,
Understand what the state is.
I am a witness of Steam as well, and for instance, when I start a node, I start with an empty database, and I start a replay of the blockchain. And that replay of the blockchain goes block by block and plays all the transactions over the state. So at the end, and it takes forever, at the end you will end up with the state,
With the same state.
that the other guys have.
Yeah.
So you play all the transactions over that. So
Most recent stage.
yeah. So what's happening in EOS is that they will not keep the entire state. They will make some kind of effort to take out of RAM, because the state has to be kept in RAM on the nodes. They will take out of RAM part of the state that's not used anymore, or that doesn't make any sense.
That's why you have to pay to keep the state in the RAM. You have to pay for the RAM if
Okay.
you want to keep it in memory.
Great conversation. But I think if we open up for different questions, and then if you guys want to continue, we talk about it later. Any other questions not related to RAM? Yes.
I'm curious about the recording contracts.
Right. Oh, sorry. That's a big part that I forgot. So the recording contract, it sounds very complicated, but basically it's taking legal prose, so human readable code, writing that computers cannot process. Let's say things like fair or all these human languages that have nuances in it. But on these contracts, there's also parameters that are machine readable. Let's say like, I'll pay you a fair amount after 3 days. 3 days is machine readable. So it creates these, you have your code written in a human readable form, and you have the code that's executing, that's interpreting the legal code into a program. And what that does is that if the program does not behave as your recording contract said it will, then you have breached your contract, and you go to arbitration to fix it.
Yeah.
So
I was able to
that example
generate-
that you gave, if 3 days have gone by and you have not paid for, then there's a breach of contract.
Yeah, and you can take it to a lawyer.
You can take it
My
to
point
court.
is, I was able to generate the recording contracts. I'm just curious about the usability and how, what's the workflow for me to generate a contract, and how does it get to the user? Does that contract goes into the blockchain? Is it
I think the contract's gonna be public on the blockchain, and then the hash of it will also be included in your code, but I'm not certain on that.
Yeah, but right now I don't think it just generates a file.
Okay, so I have to.
An HTML, it's not HTML, it's Markdown.
Okay, so I will do more research and I'll get back to you.
I don't see how we can enforce contracts between unknown parts.
Sorry?
I don't see how we can enforce a contract between unknown parts, because your account on EOS is not an identity.
Why is identity from the perspective of the blockchain?
Yes, but it's not from the legal perspective outside of the
Wait, so that's the thing. We don't want to take this outside the blockchain. We want to be able to resolve everything inside the blockchain. So, yeah. I have something to say, but I completely forgot. Sorry. So, any other questions? Yes.
Regarding the community side of the project and blockchains in general, because I follow specifically, or I'm mostly interested in blockchains that give the power to the users. That was
That's great.
the biggest dream and reason for the existence of crypto, and we know where Bitcoin and Ethereum and other projects have went. So I like a lot of these community side of EOS, where we can vote to elect block producers. In that regard, there are the working proposals that came from inflation. Do you know anything about that? If us users, investors, whatever, will have a say in that working proposals, in that 3 or 4% of inflation, where they will be invested or not?
I think it just goes to a voting mechanism. It's kind of like how you vote block producers into place. So it just be same thing. So anyone could make a proposal, but you will only activate if you have reached a certain threshold of votes.
Like crowdfunding.
It's not crowdfunding because this comes from inflation.
It's blockchain funding. It's more like Dash. You know Dash?
Yeah, it has a very similar concept.
Because in most blockchains, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I know where that exists. I can give you an example. Smart Cash as a big focus in the community. We can already vote in these proposals. So it has a lot of community spirit. I see EOS going there, but Dan Larimer hasn't showed us.
Maybe because it's something that has been around for quite some time. BitShares has it. And I think they are implementing something similar on EOS as well. So BitShares, you can check on BitShares website. They have a lot of information about work proposals there. It should be the same.
Regarding that, what you said, I seem to recall that there's a very skewed distribution of the token. So when you think you're going to vote, and your vote means nothing, which, by the way, happens in any voting system, you seem to have the top 10 holders of the token at this point. Allegedly, they are probably the biggest exchanges, sure, but are the exchanges going to let each individual internal account that owns a certain balance of EOS inside the exchange, so not on the blockchain, it's inside the exchange, how will they enable those users to vote? Because if they don't, then all the votes are their own, and in that case, 10 at the most identities will elect the block producers, and none of the others actually get a say, because you will vote and it doesn't count.
Yeah, so I have...
Because you can't make a difference.
Sorry, I'm a little drunk. There's two answers to that. One is the most major exchanges already said they gotta let users vote. Actually, three answers, sorry. Secondly, I think it's probably best if you keep it in the wallet that you own and use vote through other channels. And three, I think future exchanges, especially the ones that are going to be going EOS, are going to be decentralized exchanges, so the exchanges will never handle your funds. And I think it just, like, decentralized exchanges such needed, and it just makes so much more sense. The only reason why decentralized exchange is not being built today is because it's too slow, right? Yeah. And they could like do things like front run by paying a transaction fee, extra transaction. Well, you also don't have that kind of problem. So Bitfinex, one of the big supporters and block producers, are going to build a decentralized exchange. So that way that your funds are never going to touch exchange wallet. You always have funds in your own wallet. So hopefully those three factors would alleviate, if not eliminate, that kind of problem. And the last thing, I think, and this is the thing that concerns me the most personally, is the concentration of tokens in in a small number of token holders. Not to get too philosophical, but I think that's the problem we also face with capitalism.
Yes.
And with like these cryptocurrency projects, it's kind of like pure, unalterated capitalism. The more money you have, the more you're going to invest, the more money you get. There are solutions, but it would depend on the application developers, it would depend on the community. I think Steam is one of the best examples where they build a system where the workers or the content producers not only get paid, but they get a share of the decision-making power in the network. And that becomes very powerful. So you're paying not only in liquid Steam that you can sell off, but you're also paying Steam power, which becomes a decision-making tool. So that makes the system a lot more decentralized. I think there are actually things that needs to be done, but I think this is a problem that plagues every single cryptocurrency projects, where wealth is concentrated and to an extent, capitalism society.
So just to summarize, at this stage, we're hoping that those exchanges will allow every balance holder to vote.
Yeah, so all the top ones say they will, and I think the top ones probably account for 30% of the token holders. 30% of tokens the top exchanges account for most of the tokens held in exchanges. And those exchanges say they'll create some kind of voter portal to allow EOS token holder to vote. And one of the other things I want to bring up that I didn't have time, and this is the last thing I'll say before we gather around or you guys gotta go home, etc., is that one of the most interesting things so far in EOS I found was that Bitmain, the company we just talked about, actually declared their candidacy. They want to become a block producer. But because of the track record in the industry, most of the community members have decided not to vote them in place. So this is a very interesting thing. It's like the top player in Bitcoin and in Ethereum is not going to have a say in the EOS blockchain. I think that's a very, very powerful thing. Yes.
One last question,
Yes.
and I think it's really important, and I didn't find online enough information about that. To be a block producer, you have to have a quite significant amount of money nowadays. The machines and the requirements to be a block producer, or at least to compete with the ones that are in place, is
Quite significant. Yeah.
insane.
Right.
So, is there any like in Steam, for instance, there are other block producers, other witnesses that are able to still make a block from time to time. Will EOS have something like that, or some incentives to the non-top 21?
So in EOS, not only the top 21 gets paid, it's the top 121. So you have a list of 100 extra candidates to choose from. Now I agree that the competition now is very fierce to be, you know, like we talk about, you know, Bitfinex, we talk about Banker, like these guys have massive hardware and like military grade security. You know, it's very difficult to compete with them.
Yeah.
But again, Bitmain is one of the most technological advanced players in the industry, but they're not getting elected. So it's not only about the technical capability of your entity that's running for block producer, but it's also about your reputation. And I could imagine that in the future, maybe that we will have a system where block producers that are underfunded but show reputable actions will be funded by the community to acquire hardware to become block
To
producers.
support a block producer.
Maybe. But again, that's just pure speculation.
Yeah, but it makes sense because I'm not running for a block producer.
You should.
I had enough of that with Steam. It's quite a responsibility, and I don't have time for that. But I am still a witness at rank 42. Yeah, it's a lot of effort. But in EOS, I wouldn't have time to.
Right.
My business is developing. It's not an IT thing, but I am curious about that because I really think that the community part of the block producers and the guys that take care of the network, it's really important. It's not just the big players, you know. And if that is a possibility, I really think that's a very big advantage.
I have more ideas about that, but that's just pure speculation, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Why is it so expensive to have a node?
It's not expensive at all. You can run your own node, which is your PC.
No, I mean,
but the competition is very fierce. That's the thing. Like you could. I mean, if you have a gaming PC, you could probably do it with like a maybe Xeon Intel processor. But you're up against people who have like massive hardware. So it's about it being able to provide.
you need a massive hardware actually.
Well,
Because there is no proof of stake.
There's all the transactions they have to process, the millions and potentially billions.
What are these? Do we have the minimum specs that are expected to make into the top 21?
They have minimum specs, but I'm not sure to make it to the top.
I don't know it from the top of my head, but it's a huge amount of RAM, like I don't know, 64 cores at least, and terabytes and terabytes of SSD.
Terabytes and 64 cores is not.
So it's insane.
It's not significant for me. So how much RAM are we talking about? 1 terabyte? 2 terabytes?
Yeah.
One.
In one single machine or on the distributed cluster?
Only one machine.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna let you guys continue the conversation after. Thank you very much.